So today we're going to dive into a story that's really told through two completely different histories. One is the story of a whole nation literally tearing itself apart. The other, it's the story of a single child lost in the gears of a foreign government. And at first glance, they seem like they're worlds apart, right? But they are deeply connected by one profound unanswered question that is, amazingly, also a name. Why? It's the question every kid asks about the world. But it was also the name a mother gave her son, a name that would, in the end, come to define his entire life. And that one little word, that one powerful question, is the thread that's going to pull these two stories together. So let's start with the nation. So on one hand, you've got this epic, sweeping history, the Ethiopian Revolution and the decades of brutal conflict that came after it. And on the other, you have this really intimate, personal story of a boy just trying to figure out where he belongs. We're about to see how the fate of an entire nation and the fate of one small boy were set on a collision course, and it all starts with the fall of an empire. All right, so our story kicks off in Ethiopia, a nation that had been ruled for 40 years by Emperor Haile Selassie. We're talking about a figure who, to some, was basically a living god. But this ancient empire, it was right on the edge of a massive, violent change. You see, Haile Selassie had built this system where he controlled everything. He picked who was in power, he treated the nation's treasury like it was his own bank account, he even had the final say on the leadership of the church. I mean, we're talking about total control. But as you can probably guess, underneath all that, something was brewing. And this right here just perfectly captures how disconnected the regime was. Imagine it, 5,000 guests, sipping champagne, enjoying a wedding cake that was so expensive it had to be flown in from London. This incredible show of wealth became the symbol for a ruling class that had no idea what was happening to its own people. Yeah, at the exact same time as that ridiculously lavish party, 200,000 people were dying of starvation in the Wello province. In that contrast, that brutal, unbelievable difference between a $10,000 cake and mass starvation, well, that was the spark that lit the fuse for a revolution. Okay, so as Ethiopia is just descending into total chaos, thousands of miles away, over in England, a little boy's life is also being completely turned upside down. But not by war. No, his was being uprooted by the quiet, grinding gears of a government system. Back in Ethiopia, things happened fast, and they were brutal. The emperor was thrown out, and this military committee called the Derg took over. They got rid of the monarchy, declared a socialist state, and then, under their leader Mengistu Haile Mariam, they kicked off what became known as the Red Terror. We're talking tens of thousands of people who were seen as enemies of the state were just rounded up, imprisoned, or even executed. The entire country was being violently remade. And then you see this. A school report from England for a little boy named Norman. This is our other main character. In his world, it's all about playgrounds and classrooms. The report says he's happy, popular, carefree. He has absolutely no idea about the storm unfolding in the country where he was born. So in Norman's mind, everything's fine. It's stable. His foster parents even told him, "We're your parents forever." But just listen to the difference in the language here. In the social worker's file, are seen by Norman as his parents. It's so cold, so detached. It's a clue that his world isn't built on love, It's built on paperwork, and that paperwork can be changed. So in both of these places, a fight for survival kicks off. In Ethiopia, people started fighting back against the suppressive military government. And in England, a little boy began his own quiet fight against a cold, impersonal system. Now this is where it gets really interesting, and maybe a little uncomfortable. Look at the parallel here. On the left, you've got the tools a military dictatorship uses to control its people, forcing them into new villages, blasting them with propaganda, forcing them into the army. And on the right, the tools of a state care system, defining a child with case files, moving them around like chess pieces, controlling their life with institutional rules. In both cases, the system decides it knows best, reshaping human lives. The fight back in Ethiopia was absolutely fierce. Rebel groups used the mountains to their advantage, waging a pretty sophisticated guerrilla war. They even had their own propaganda radio stations, they armed local militias, and they built these powerful alliances to take on the Dirk's massive army. Meanwhile,
The boy we knew as Norman, he finds his own way to resist. For him, the battle was all about his identity, who he really was. So he started writing poems. And just listen to this incredible quote. He uses the language of war, flags in the mountainside, to talk about his poems. Think about that. His poems were his weapons. They were his way of planting a flag and saying, I exist, in a world that was basically trying to erase him. So the very system that was supposed to protect him, yeah, it became his prison. He got moved to a place that was basically a high-security jail, where kids in care were locked up right alongside young offenders. Beatings were just part of life. This wasn't just a fight for who he is anymore. It was a fight to just get through it.
And so for almost 20 years, these two fights raged on, side by side. A nation battling for its future, and a boy battling for his past. And both of them were heading straight for a collision, a moment of truth. In Ethiopia, the tide of the war finally turned. The rebels pulled off some huge military victories, crippling the Derg's army. By May of 1991, the rebels were on the doorstep of the capital city, and Mengistu, the dictator, fled the country. Just like that, 17 years of military rule were over.
And incredibly, at almost the exact same time, the boy's war with the system also comes to an end. When he turns 18, he's out of the care system, and they just hand him a stack of papers. His entire life, written down by people who didn't know him at all. But inside that stack was the key to his own story.
And it's in those files that he finds it, his real name, not Norman, Lemnin. He finds out his mother was an Ethiopian student, and that in her culture it's a tradition to put a message inside a child's name. And his name, Lemnin, meant why. The question that had been shadowing his entire life, without him even knowing it, was right there. It was his name, given to him by his mother. So what does all this mean? What's the point of connecting a huge revolution in East Africa with one boy's name found in a government file in England? Well, when you put these two stories together, you're forced to ask this question. Because what this shows us is that the victims of history, they aren't just soldiers on a battlefield. They are the lives that get displaced, the families that get broken, and the identities that get stolen from its children, whether they're caught in the middle of the fighting or scattered thousands of miles from home. At the end of the day, looking at Ethiopia's civil war and Lem Sisay's childhood side by side, it shows us something really profound. History's biggest battles aren't always fought with guns and armies. Sometimes they're fought in the quiet, desperate struggle to just understand who we are and why. It's the fight to answer that one simple, incredibly powerful question.